Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel and to the Wednesday follow-up video where we address the questions and comments from Saturday's video on where I bored, keyed, and put a set screw hole in that big sprocket. Well, it wasn't a very big sprocket. It was small compared to some of them I've done in the past, but still a fairly large sprocket. You know, 19 inches I think on the outer diameter of the tooth. So, good sized. So let's dive into the questions. All right, so the first question here we're going to address is seems to me to be a silly question, but why do you use a cooling compound on the lathe and cutting oil in the slaughter? I get there's a hint in the names, but is there a deeper reason, like why not coolant for both? The reason I don't use coolant in the slaughter is because it evaporates, and I don't use that machine on a regular basis, so I'm not replenishing it as much as, say, the lathe, you know, when I was using that on a regular basis. Now I'm kind of fighting with the loss of coolant because of evaporation, having not been in here much at all, so kind of a tough one. I could switch this over to oil, but then that would make an even bigger mess. So I'll just leave this coolant, I'll just keep mixing it as needed. All right, the next one here. Thanks for sharing, love all of the big equipment you have in your shop. If you had to do it again, would you go with a Lion? I know Kyle Vanover has had to do a ton of work on his new Lion. I take it yours was fine. So, had I had to do it again, I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't buy a new machine. I wouldn't have started this shop. But if I was stupid and dumb like I am and kept going, I would absolutely buy this machine again. Absolutely, no questions asked. It's been a great machine. No problems with it whatsoever. Kyle must have got a lemon. I just, that's all I can say. I mean, I bought mine, you know, around COVID time. So I'm wondering if the manufacturing quality, like everything else post-COVID, has gone down the tubes. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But he's got a great machine now with all the work he's put into it. So it's working out really well for him. Just very unfortunate it had to go that way. All right, the next several questions here are over here at the boring mill. So since we use that to drill and tap the set screw hole, nice one. Does the quill on that HBM have a hand feed like a vertical mill then I assume? So the tap just self-feeds once it starts cutting. So yes, it does have a hand feed. We have this here, which is a hand feed. And then when we get this to pop into gear just right, this is a fine feed. And then there's power feed here. We can engage either direction, forward or reverse. So yes, there is a power feed. It is hand feed. It is just a quill, just like a Bridgeport, except it's very long. There's about 2 feet there. Well, I'm not going to run it all the way out because it's just kind of at an odd angle for me right now. But yeah, there's 2 feet of quill there, so pretty nice. Do you hand feed the big boring bar or is it on auto feed? So that must be a lathe question. That I hand feed it. I was hoping, you know, when people refer to the tooling, you know, this is a boring bar, technically. This is what a lot of people call a boring mill, is a boring bar. So yeah, he must be referring to the donkey dick. That was all power feed. Josh, when you tap a hole on the boring mill, do you use power feed? No, never, no. You're just power tapping like you would on any other machine. No power feed. How do you synchronize the feed to the threads on the tap? You don't. You hand feed it. You let it do its job. Let it cut. Let it pull itself in. Let it back itself out. It is basically, it's cutting its thread. It makes the first few cuts, and then it just does the job. Pulls it in, pushes it out. It's no different than a screw going in and out of a hole. It's just cutting. That boring mill is huge. When you initially got it and put it in that shop, did it come as one unit or was it in several parts? One piece, 37,000 pounds, one piece. Brought it in on a Landau truck with skates, rolled it off, rolled it into position. It was 20 below zero when we got it loaded on the semi. Came about 2 hours north from where I bought it. And when we got here, so figure 60 mile an hour wind chill at 20 below zero, it was pretty cold. We rolled it in the shop and I set it right in the middle of the floor just to let it warm up. For 3 days, you could not get within 5 feet of this thing. It was white. It was a solid block of frost with the in-floor heat. And within 5 feet of it, it was cold, but you stepped back and you were nice and warm. And it took 3 days, and then that frost was gone. And it was all warm to the touch. It was perfect. No issues whatsoever, but it was one piece, one big unit. Is the forward speed of the tap tied to the thread pitch somehow? Exactly. It's all tied to the thread pitch. That tap is creating its own threads for the bolt that the tap is set to. There is nothing that's creating that other than that tap. When a drill pushes through, there's always a little extra material on the backside, so I'm assuming the tap cleans that out. If you weren't tapping that, however, how would you get in the keyway to deburr that material? Or would you drill first so that the vertical slaughter keeps the clean edge? Well, drilling it first and then using the slaughter would leave a burr in the other direction from the slotting. So all you do is hit it with a file. It comes right out. A little piece of high-speed steel or a file, it comes right out. It's nothing crazy. Can you explain for us uneducated how the machine performs the tapping? Well, I think I already did. The tap is doing all the work. It's just power tapping. It's nothing special. It's nothing crazy. No feeds, no nothing tied into it. It's just the tap pulling itself in and pushing itself out. That simple. We had a lot of questions on that tapping, and I just, honestly, I don't understand it because it's no different than on a vertical machine. You're doing exactly the same thing, just on a horizontal plane. Totally same exact thing. All right, all the next questions are over here at the slaughter, so let's dive in. I'm guessing you went straight to the 7/8 cutter because the gear wasn't as thick. Oh, it's a sprocket. Gears are different than a sprocket. And yes, it was because of the shorter stroke, and it wasn't an interrupted cut. That was actually 2 pieces welded again, but them were welded really close, actually surprisingly close. So yeah, very, very good on that one for the way they made it, so I'm glad that worked out. But yeah, that's why I went straight to the full size and then just went and did it. Great job as always. Just curious, does your slaughter have the ability to mill internal splines? I noticed that it has a rotating table, but I don't remember if you said it's powered or rotates in conjunction with the stroke of the cutter or not. So yes, you can mill splines on this. The rotary table, all the feeds on this, when they're working correctly, feed when it hits the upstroke. So when it comes up, it feeds, and it'll feed whatever you set it at if it's working correctly. These Mori machines I know are notorious for not working correctly, and someday I'm going to dive into that gearbox and figure out what I can do to make it a little better. If not, replace it with something a little better. And a friend of mine's been talking about he's got the same machine and putting limit switches on and a servo motor just to drive that to get consistent feeds, and that might be a way to go too. But we're toying with some. I want to tear into that gearbox first. What are you using again to create that little oil dam on the slaughter? Butyl tape. That is just butyl tape, round 3/8 inch diameter butyl tape. One of my viewers suggested it, and that has been just an amazing asset for doing this stuff. Just form up your little dam, and it sticks right on the material, cleans up easy. It's inexpensive. It's worked great. So yeah, butyl tape, B-U-T-Y-L. I think I got that stuff on Scamazon. It was like $10 for a box of 50 feet or something. It was nothing. All right, this one, 3 questions. Can the slaughter cutter be sharpened, or is it carbide? Sure, it can be sharpened. It's just high-speed steel. So yeah, they can be sharpened. Usually what goes wrong is the corners. The sharp corner out here goes bad, so we just narrow them up. So just take them down to the next size or whatever you need. Usually there isn't an issue on the face or the cutting edge, but just them corners. The corners are where they take the most damage. On this job, was the slaughter taking about 1 thou per pass? Yeah, it was roughly 1 to 2. And is that adjustable too? Sure, absolutely. Everything is adjustable. I was hand feeding because my my feed box doesn't feed consistently, and that's, like I said, a very common problem on these. And I found just hand feeding is pretty easy. You know, you just catch it on the upstroke and just feed it another thou, another 2, another 3, whatever you're cutting. You can. I've fed up to 4 thou at a time with a narrower cutter. On the wider ones, yeah, 1 to 2 is about right. So here's one. That broaching machine is a beast. Well, it's not a broaching machine. It's a slaughter. It's a vertical shaper. I don't own a broaching machine. Those are something totally different. Thinking about it, I've never seen a CNC machine that broaches. They do make tooling now that can go in a CNC lathe or a CNC mill and will broach or slot. They'll slot. That's what it is. They're basically a slaughter cutter, and they put it in the tool holder and they just feed it in and just chip away at it. They work. They work good on small stuff. I have jobs that I do on this machine for another shop that they can't do on their CNCs, but I can do on this. So yeah, you can do it on a CNC. There are tooling out there nowadays. All right, that broaching machine is a beast, not a broach. This is a slaughter, vertical shaper. What year was it manufactured? 1942. It was built in 1942 for, I believe it was Northern Engineering. And it's hard to read. I won't bring you over here, but it is on here. Northern Pump Company in Fridley, Minnesota, 1942. So it's an old machine. Been around, done some work. There's a lot of story behind that, and I think we're going to dive into that stuff on the members only stuff. The stories of the machines and how I got them and things like that. I'm going to start working on that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in a channel membership, we'll work into getting into the stuff, the history of the equipment and things like that. All right, back over to the lathe because I missed 2 questions. 2 lathe questions. What do you do when the sprocket tooth count does not divide evenly by 3? Go to a 4-jaw or switch to a different machine, so on a sprocket with a larger pitch, so like a 60 pitch will generally cover the jaw just fine. If it's off, you're still going to hit in that jaw and it's going to work out well. An 80 pitch would definitely be an issue. 100, 120, getting into that bigger stuff, then you're going to have problems and you're going to have to go to a 4-jaw. That's about the only way to do it. In damn near 30 years of doing this, I have only once ever not been able to do it in the 3-jaw. I did have one that wouldn't work in the 3-jaw, but I just made custom jaws for it because it was a repeat job. So that is one way to do that. Didn't see you face one side to get it true with the bore for setup on the slaughter like you do with the bigger ones. No, not needed or done off camera. So those big ones are trash, absolute trash. So it is needed on those. This smaller one, this fit in there beautifully. It's set up perfectly. There wasn't an issue. But them big ones that I do, there's plenty of videos of those, and check out the older videos. Those things are trash. I have to do it on those just to make sure that it's true. They're just that bad. All right, so there were a lot of comments I want to address here, several of them actually. You must have a lot of patience. I'm married. Of course I've got patience. Those of you old guys that are married, you understand what I mean. Oh boy. Yes, I have patience. Sometimes not much, and the older I get, the less I have. This world's going to crap. All right, so there are a few more here. Are you in your shop full-time now, or do you still have your day job? I still have my day job. There is not enough work here to even remotely consider this a part-time job. If I do 3 hours out here a week, that's pushing it. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Love the video. I wish your shop could operate full-time again. I don't. I really like what I'm doing now. I really do like what I do now. I should have pulled the plug on this shop years ago. I really should have. The stress level is so much less. It's just so much easier. Better job all around. Just there's guaranteed work, unlike this, where this region just died. There's nothing left. And another one here, good thing you've kept the shop and the machines to look after your few remaining customers. If you weren't there, where would they go to get their work done with your area being dead? Don't know. And I'm not taking on new work, new customers, because I just don't want it. I'm just going to maintain the few that I got left. They're good customers. They're good people. I'll just, there's nothing new ever going to come to this area that's worthwhile, so I'm not going to worry about it. But if I weren't here, they'd be shipping it down to the cities. That's all there is to it. They'd figure a way. There's a will, there's a way, but yeah, honestly, I should have had the auction, because what I'm paying to maintain all this, to keep the heat on, the lights on, all that, to, tooling, whatnot, I'm losing money. I really am. But it's a great hobby shop if I ever get to feel, to feel like I want to be in here doing stuff again. But that day will come. So I think that was pretty much all of them. Yeah, that was pretty much all of them. So I hope you got all your answers you were looking for, those of you that asked them and those that didn't ask them, but were wondering anyway. Hope you enjoyed the video. Check out the older content, a lot of good stuff there. Next weekend's video, we're building the trusses for the sawmill shed. Finally building the trusses. My father-in-law Todd and I started putting them together. We're still a ways away from putting them up though. Got a lot of work to do. And then I don't have a video after that. I don't know what we're gonna do. The following weekend, June 28th, 29th, I believe it is the Hungry Hollow Steam and Gas Engine Show. They've asked me to bring my F12 and water wagon, but I just don't have the time. I don't have the time to get everything there and, be there for the whole show. I will be there Saturday for the steam engines to help out and, just make sure everything's going well. But if you're in the area, Rice Lake, Wisconsin, and want to check out the Hungry Hollow Steam and Gas Engine Show, it's June 28th, 29th, I believe. It's that last full weekend of the month. In fact, let me look. I got my calendar right here. 27th and 28th. June 27th and 28th. So if you're in the area, want to check out the show, I'll be there Saturday for sure. Probably about 8 o'clock till noon, 1, 2, somewhere in there. So if you want to come meet me, I'll be there. So with that, I guess that's it. Till next time, get out in your shop, get it done right the first time.
Too dumb to quit, too proud to cry, still grinding steel under a fading sky. The last machine shop in a frozen hell, just me and a dream I can't see.